I want to say good afternoon to Mr. Foster. How you doing, sir?
Well, good afternoon, Amaru. Thank you for the invitation. Nice to be here.
You very rarely get a chance to speak to someone who has so much knowledge and exceeded expectations. And for me, I guess it always starts to the beginning. Like, what was life like for you originally when you grew up in Bolton? Was it Bolton you was born in?
I was born in Bolton, indeed, yes. What was life like? Well, I was born in 1935.
Don't look it, by the way.
Yeah, 87. But not born in 35, and 4 years later, in 1939, we had World War II. So all the lights went out. Everything was dark. You couldn't have lights on. But you know, both Jeff and myself, we were kids. So when you're kids, what's different? That's normal. So for me, growing up, World War II was probably quite normal. I had no fears of it, of course, too young. But we were able to see the effects of bombing on Manchester because Bolton is slightly elevated. And so from our bedroom windows, when there was an air raid going on, we could see what was going on in Manchester, and you could see the light of the flames and bombs dropping over there. So growing up, yes, it was 10 before World War II was over, and before really education for me started. Because up till then, we had very little education. All the guys, they'd been called up. So they were fighting a war. So all we had was a few of the women who were teachers. But in those days, of course, women stayed at home. Women brought up families. So there were not many women, so there were not many teachers. We did get a bit. We got a bit in sort of the main room of the house where we would go. A few kids would go in there and would be taught. But right, so it's 1945 before the war is over and education starts proper. And life changed. All of a sudden, the lights are on, street lights are on, everything is bright again. And so, being brought up in the north of England, both Jeff and I were in the scouting movement, so we enjoyed that. And I went to college. My brother Jeff, he started with the J.W. Foster Company. That's my grandfather's company, which he started in 1895. So it goes way back to them when the family started in sports footwear. But so Jeff started in the business. I started at 17. By the time I'm 18, both Jeff and myself were called up to do national service. So conscripted for 2 years. So that was growing up in Bolton. We did the normal things that kids do. Yeah, when it snowed, we had sledges. We enjoyed life, and we didn't really know. I'm not really concerned. Our parents must have been concerned. Obviously, there's a war on, but for us, we were just kids. So kicking the ball around was fair enough, not a problem.
So I think it's interesting that you said that there wasn't really a war. I mean, you weren't scared with the war, or is it because the media isn't what it is now, that isn't that powerful to let you know actually what's really the severity of what's going on?
Well, you got to go back to the 1940s. Radio was a rare thing in those days. And we didn't have the social media we have today. We didn't have the media we had. You had newspapers, and most of that, we'll say that propaganda took over. So we were told the good news. You were never told the real bad news because all you had was a newspaper and a very limited amount of sound on a radio. And the radios in those days were quite primitive, having to tune them in. So really, what we saw was what we knew. And we were not influenced by anything, really. The newspapers, as I say, they were told what to print. They were told to print good news. If it was bad news, don't print it. So really, we were just brought up fairly well insulated, apart from being able to see 10 miles into Manchester, and that was going on. One or two bombs did drop in Bolton, and in fact one dropped quite near to the J.W. Foster's Olympic Works, and actually blew the window in. And so my father, instead of going in through the door, he just climbed in through the front window on that day. And he did bring back a piece of shrapnel from the bomb, and that's obviously what shattered the window. That it gone through the window, and we had that piece of shrapnel for years. I don't know what happened to it, but it was a big piece of chunk of metal. And yeah, so the Warriors, yes, when you're young, you know, you're insulated from most things. And until I was 18, Jeff actually was 20, but he had been deferred, so we went at the same time. Both did national service. I was in the RAF, Jeff went to Germany in the army, and he saw Adidas and Puma.
I was going to ask you, so you spoke about your grandfather. So in terms of entrepreneurship, which is what we call it today, like, did that type of element of him having his own business or setting up business, did that feed into you growing up, or was it totally separate how you guys decided to set up your own?
My grandfather, he was born in 1880, but he died in 1933, and I wasn't born until 35. But 15 months after he died, I was born on his birthday. So I took his name. Grandmother insisted. My grandfather was Joseph William, so I was christened Joseph William. So I took his name. But grandfather, you know, we talk about entrepreneurs, we talk about influencers. That guy must have been a genius in his day. He knew how to influence. He would give his product to leading athletes. They would win races, they would break world records. In 1904, he had 3 world records in one race in Glasgow. Alf Shrub was the guy's name, and he broke 3 world records in a 1-hour race. So he had world records. 1908, and in London, grandfather picked up 2 gold medals. At least athletes wearing his shoes picked up 2 gold medals. His real belle epoque, his century was the 1920s. In 1920s, and we have a letterhead with all the details on, not only football team, but he supplied all the Olympic runners, athletes at the Antwerp Olympics in 1920. I think when he says that, he's probably talking about all the British athletes. Maybe Commonwealth, I don't know, but those days, the Olympics were just track and field. So much simpler than it is today, you know, just a few athletic events. But also during the 20s, 3 athletes, Harold Abrahams, Lord Burleigh, and Eric Liddell, they all won gold medals. And they were all immortalized in the film Chariots of Fire. And I don't know if you know Chariots of Fire, but if you do, they were immortalized in that. So that's my grandfather. That's the sort of business he grew. Fantastic.
And then for yourself, it's cliche, but how did you start the Reebok brand with your brother?
Well, as I say, Jeff and myself, we started with the company, and at 18 we went to do national service. Before we went to do national service, we were just teenagers enjoying life, doing the normal thing that teenagers do. And but going away, you go away for 2 years, your mother's not there. You've got to make your own bed. You know, food isn't the same. You've got to go for your food. So you're not delivered everything on a plate, and you start to learn how to look after yourself. And I did okay because I could play badminton reasonably well in those days. So for most of my 2 years national service, I was off playing badminton, and that was great, good fun for me. Although my job was radar operating, which was controlling fighter planes, and we set up what they call PIs, practice interceptions. Practice interceptions where they got 2 planes and they had to come together, either head on or from the side. But so that's what I did when I was working. Most of the time I was playing badminton. So, but what happened in those 2 years, we did change, and we came back. And we came back to J. Edward Foster's, and we came back to a failing company. The company was just failing. What grandfather had built, great company, lots of successes. In fact, on this same letter that I was talking about, we have 96 football and rugby teams that grandfather supplied, both boots and training shoes. And teams like Arsenal, Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool, you name all the big football teams we know in the UK, they all wore Foster's boots in the 1920s, which is incredible. And yet, when Jeff and I came back to Foster's, we didn't supply any of those. We'd lost it to Adidas. Totally lost the football scene to Adidas. And Jeff and I, we tried to persuade, first my father. Uncle was not interested, and my father said, come on, we've got to do something. You know, we need something on the road. We need to do some marketing. We need some new models, some new ideas. Didn't make any difference. And all my father could say to me was, Joe, look, when your uncle's gone and when I'm gone, this business is yours. You can do what you want with it. And I'm saying, come on, Dad, you know, we don't want you to go. Number one, you know, who wants you to go? But number two, this company will be gone long before you. It's going to die. Didn't make any difference. So Jeff and I, we had little option really. We did go to we went to college at night, and to footwear. We learned about making shoes. And okay, we should know about making shoes. We knew about making running shoes and football boots, but we didn't really know anything about the business. You know, how shoes are properly made, the opportunities. But the big thing about that was not only learning, but we made a lot of friends. We met a lot of people in the industry. And so when we did leave, that was to prove a really great help, because we wanted a machine to do this, a machine, things that Foster hadn't bought. They used very old methods. We wanted to get some new methods. And so we asked our friends, and we were able to buy machinery and set up our little factory. So in 1958, Jeff and I set up our company, Mercury Sports Footwear.
And what, at that point, were the challenges you were having in business?
Well, the first challenge was that we knew we needed a future, and Foster's would not be our future. So that was our first challenge, set up a company. The challenges, well, there were a number of sports footwear manufacturers in the UK, not a lot, but they were all bigger than we were. And the biggest challenge was the fact that we couldn't go into football. That was owned at that point by Adidas. It would have taken so much money. So we turned to what we knew, and that was running, athletics, cycling. We went into cycling first, and we also went into rugby league. Rugby league is a North of England sport. So we were looking for white spaces. We call these white spaces where the bigger guys, they were too small for them to even worry about. And at the time, they probably didn't even know they existed, like fell running in the north of England, where fell running, cross country, a lot of things that really we could go into, which is great. We did very well at that. We owned that business, which meant we were well into the sports business. We knew, and it's a question whether were we in the shoe business or were we in the sports business? Well, we were more in the sports business than the shoe business, because a lot of the people who were our competitors, you might say, local manufacturers, were in the shoe business. And if somebody said, make a pair of football boots, they'd just make the product. We were with the athletes. We were part of the athletes. And we'd go to events, and we would sell out to the back of the car and things like that. But I really thought, okay, we told my father what he needed, and he needed to get out there and sell his product. So I thought, I'll go out there and sell the product. Off I go, calling on all these sports shops. Great. Here I am, meet the guy, the buyer. I'm Reebok. Who's Reebok? Who's Reebok? Well, it's me, showing the product. Oh, nice product. And then he'd look up and think, look, I've got Dunlop. I've got Adidas. Why do I need Reebok? And I must have heard that a dozen times. Why do I need Reebok? So it occurred to me he didn't need Reebok. These retailers didn't need me. They used to sell anything. They were just sports shops, usually run by an ex-footballer who just opened the store, and he'd sell everything from snooker cues and chalk for your tip and anything that was sports. So we were lucky. We used to go to these events, these running events, and I thought, these are my customers. I should be selling to these guys. And well, the 3As in those days, the Amateur Athletic Association, they had a handbook. And every club every running athletics club was affiliated to the 3As, and there must have been 400 in this book. And we got the name and address of every secretary of every club. What do? A letter. I send a letter to every club and invite them to buy direct from us, and we'll give them 15% discount. And if anybody in the club wants to become an agent, he can have the 15%. And great, I got 100 agents on that first letter. Second letter, another 50 agents, and eventually I ended with about 250 agents. That was our business. Now we were selling direct. And I'm then getting phone calls from these sports stores who said, who's Reebok? And they're saying, you're selling to our local sports club. Look, I'll stock your product if you stop selling direct. And I said, no, I'm not stopping selling direct, but you can get it at wholesale price, which is less than 50%. And I'm sure you can give your sports club 15%, because that's pretty normal discount for clubs. About 90 of them agreed, but I'm not going to stop selling direct, because to us, that was our marketing. You know, that was how we got our market, and great. So we had a very nice business, but you know, the big business was football, and we couldn't get there because Adidas really had got that sewn up. So for me, it was America, and the family were not too happy to send me to America or let me go to America, because that would have cost a lot of money to go there and start looking for distribution. So luckily, I'm reading a magazine, Eurosport I think it was called, and the British government are advertising for people to export. And they're saying, we will pay, we will actually pay for a stand at the NSGA show, that's the National Sporting Goods of America. We'll pay for a stand, we will pay your return airfare, and we'll also pay 50% of your expenditure whilst you're there. So that was it. I'm going to America. It's 1968.
That is almost like the perfect gateway for you to actually expand. It just seemed like it was like almost divine intervention in a way to get you over there. But my question to you is, and I feel like sometimes people live in like certain regions within the UK, they don't see a global vision. So what, minus the blocks of like Adidas having a monopoly over the market, what made you think, what were you seeing that made you think America was a place for you to take the business?
Well, in the first place, there's 350 million at that time, Americans, and the bulk of Americans spoke English. A few do speak Spanish, but they probably speak English as well. But so you've got almost 350 million Americans speaking English. The disposable income of the Americans was incredible. If you rank that as 100, America's 100 in terms of disposable income, and the nearest one was Japan, which was 35. Germany was about 30, and the UK was about 18. So in terms of where do you go? Because people said, why don't you go to Europe? It's nearer, you know. You've got 26, 27, 28 countries, different languages, cultures. So going to Europe, great. But then again, you had Adidas and Puma. They were in that market. They were tough. Why go somewhere which is going to be tough? Why not go somewhere where you've got a better chance? Because in America, we knew that every university, every college had coach. And coach was a god. And you could go to those colleges with a sports scholarship. I think we only had one in the UK that you could go to with a sports scholarship. However, in America, loads of them. So that's why I chose that market. This is where we could go, and they all did track and field. Athletics was big in America. So if I wanted to expand our business, America was the one to go to. So that was the choice.
What's the cultural differences in doing business then in America to what you found in the UK?
Well, I think the cultural difference was that they accepted things more than in the UK. The UK was sort of, if they had something, they stayed with it. It's like, we already have this, so why do we need something? Just like those retailers that I met who said, why do I need Reebok? In America, they don't do that. Reebok, another brand, another opportunity. They're more open to opportunity. So for me, it was a market, but how do I get into that market? Okay, I can show the NSJ show, and on that first show in 1968, I got a lot of people coming up saying, well, great stuff. Where do we buy these? And I'm saying, in England. What's that? Is that New England? You know, no, not New England, it's across the water, you know, England. Oh, London. London, that's it. That's where we are. They were not of a mind to import. So all these stores, again, small stores, a bit like they were in England, small stores, no, too much hard work. So I'm 1968, and I now have to search and find a distributor. When do I get my distributor? 1979. 11 years. 11 years of keep going to America. I had 6 attempts, 6 people who gave it a shot. Yeah, we'll try Reebok. They all failed. We just failed miserably. One guy I had for 4 years trying to get into that market. In the end, he gave up. We didn't get there. But the difference was that when I first went, running was really only just starting to be something in America. By 1975, it was a big event in America. Everybody, so many people were out running. So the demand for running shoes grew. During those years that I was going, running shoes grew tremendously. And a magazine called Runner's World, they started in the late 60s, and by 1975, they were a 50-page full-color magazine telling everybody where the next event was, where your 5K, 10K, half marathons, and who won this race, who won. So everybody bought this. 350 million Americans, probably 35 million were running by then. Great. And later on, about 76, Bob Anderson, who produced this magazine, he was doing so well. He knew he could tell everybody which was the best shoe to buy. So he produced this shoe edition, and of course the best shoe to buy was Nike, wouldn't it be? Nike, great. Phil Knight was really thrilled. Fantastic. But Phil Knight was importing those from Japan and Asia. And when somebody like Bob Anderson tells you, this is the #1 shoe, out of those 35 million Americans running, I want a pair of those. At least 10%, at least 3.5 million wanted that shoe. Phil Knight had no chance. You can't just turn the wick up like that. It's not, and all of a sudden, so for 12 months, all the retail trade, they're being hammered. I want a pair of those #1 shoes. They couldn't get them. And Bob Anderson, in his wisdom, at the end of 1 year, decided, no, we've got to have another #1 shoe. And just as Phil Knight's getting the product coming in, Bob Anderson puts another #1 shoe. It might have been New Balance, Etonic, Brooks. I don't know who it was, but it certainly wasn't Reebok. Same thing that happened with Phil Knight. They couldn't supply. By the time they get supplies in, another 12 months had gone. And now, though, Bob Anderson probably got his act together and decided, instead of saying there's a #1 shoe, I'm going to do star ratings. So the top shoe would be 5 stars, but you could have 3 or 4. And that was my ticket. I knew getting #1 was a lottery. That was very difficult, but I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. So in 1978, we made a shoe which we thought would become 5-star. We tested it in Edmonton at the Commonwealth Games, and we got a shed load of medals. We did really well with our shoes in Edmonton. So we talk about February. This is when the NSGA show is. February 1979, and I have my Aztec shoe, my great shoe. I have it there. And running was so big a category now that Kmart, I don't know if you know Kmart, they're a very big distributor, big retailer. They have lots of sheds. One of the big retailers in America. And they came along, the guy came along and said, look, we want 25,000 pairs. Ooh, yeah. That's about 6 months' work for our small factory in the UK. But, you know, we didn't go into this rather stupidly. We knew if we got a 5-star shoe, we needed help. And so I had friends which I'd developed, and one of those friends was in Barter. Barter still are the biggest shoemakers in the world. And they were down at Tilbury, which is pretty close to here. And my friend said, look, we'll help. You get any orders, we'll help you make them. But the guy from Kmart said, yeah, but we need a better price. Now, although Barter could make them at a better price than we could in our small factory, he meant Asia, South Korea. Luckily, again, we'd made contact with the Korean agents in London. So they were already taking the shoe and preparing samples for me. Okay, fine. So, yeah, we could do that. So that was Kmart, but I'm thinking, that's a big business, and they just they work on square footage. If they buy 25,000 pairs and they don't hit the financial figure for the square footage they give the shoes, that would be my last 25,000 pairs. So towards the end of the show, a guy called Paul Fireman came on the stand. And Paul Fireman was running a small company called Boston Camping. That's an outdoor company, and they were selling tents, fishing rods, you name all the bits and pieces that go into outdoor. And he was running that with his brother and brother-in-law. And I could tell by the way he was talking, he was pretty fed up. They've been doing it for 10 years, and it was going nowhere. So I said, Paul, look at this shoe, 5 stars. He said, you're not 5 stars, are you? No, we're not 5 stars, but, you know, think of August, and we hope we'll be 5 stars. So with Paul, he said, look, I said, Joe, if you get 5 stars, I'll be your distributor. Now, I like Paul. I could get on with him, you know, but the buyer from Kmart, it was like so remote. But Paul, you know, he knew a bit of business, he had to do business, he had to finance it. So, apart from the fact that I went across between February and the end of July to see Kmart and check them out, big company, big operation. I also went to Boston to see Paul and his brother and his brother-in-law. Nice little operation. I think it'd be nice. Bolt Reebok onto this. Fantastic. Okay, so we get to the end of July, and the August edition of Runner's World will be out at the last week in July. And I phoned Paul. I said, Paul, can you go down to the local kiosk? They must have Runner's World on by now. An hour later he came back. I said, Joe, Aztec, you got 5 stars. Oh. That was it. Wonderful. He said, not only that though, Inca, which was a spike shoe that we also sent for checking, that got 5 stars. And Midas, which was a racing shoe, also got 5 stars. So there we were. We'd arrived in America with 3 5-star shoes. Previous to this, we'd been pushing. Now, people wanted us. So now we're in America, and Paul Fireman is going to be our distributor.
What's interesting about that, what was coming into my head is, what is then happening when you're having to go through the 11 years? Like, and I was reading some of the notes, it's almost like no matter how well you plan, make contingency plans, external factors could easily derail you at any time. How did you have the faith to keep going on? Like, because wasn't there ever a time you thought, actually, no, let's just leave this part, let's just focus on the UK?
We became so well known in the UK that distributors in the UK wanted to take us and distribute our product. It meant giving up agents, and it meant giving up direct sales. But I thought, well, if we do that, it'll give me more opportunity to concentrate on America, get somebody to do distribution. The first one, great, friend of mine. He was the friend that actually went to Barter eventually. So that was good. Unfortunately, that was about 70% of our production was our Reebok production. And the company I went with, Lawrence, they went out of business. It's a story. It's in the book, what happened to that. But we went out of business. And it nearly cost us dear. But we had to put a plan together. We had to go down and collect all the shoes they hadn't sold, bring them all back, and then we started direct selling again. We started everything we could do. Otherwise, I think if the bank manager had got hold of the fact that we were not going to get paid for those shoes that we'd sent out, I think he would have had a big problem and would have been questioning our small but overdraft figures. Yeah, we'd have done. However, 2 months, it took us 2 months, maybe total 3 months, to recover from that, sell all the product. And surprisingly enough, because we were selling this direct, we were making more money. We were making more money than going through the distributor. So really, in a way, it helped our finances. We recovered from that. And shortly after that, another company came up who heard of the problem, but they also knew that Reebok was quite a desirable product. So I went with another company, and that took over. So these things were happening during those 11 years. We were growing, doing different things. We did something like, to get more visibility, during the 70s, so many countries, so many major cities started having marathons. And those marathons, they were on television. So every country, whether Brussels, whether Berlin, or, London, they all had these on television. And I thought, how do we do something here? So I organised Reebok Racing Club, which meant vests. And people could become a member of Reebok Racing Club, and it had Reebok Racing Club all the way across here. And so we started giving them to top athletes that we could give them to in the UK, and we came to a deal that if you would run at the front of a marathon and stay there as long as you can, we'll give you shoes as well. So we gave them the shoes, we gave them the kit, and they went up front, and all these televised marathons, there was Reebok Racing Club at the front, maybe 5 or 6 guys. They weren't going to win, but they could probably do the best part of 20 miles up front. So that gave us a lot of promotion. So a lot of these ideas we had to really boost the company and boost its appeal as much as anything helped. But of course, once we got the Holy Grail, once we got 3 stars, or 3 shoes with 5 stars, wow, that was it. We're in America. As far as I was concerned, we got there. But that wasn't the thing that made Reebok grow.
What was it then?
Aerobics. Women. Aerobics. We had, whilst we were growing nicely as a running company, we had a tech rep called Angel Martinez down in LA. His wife, Frankie, she's going to aerobic classes. He didn't know that. But they're coming back with their friends and they followed it, great. And Arnold is saying, Frankie, what are you doing? And she said, we're doing aerobics. What's aerobics? Well, we're actually exercising to music. And it's great fun. Arnold went to the next class. There's the instructor in a pair of sneakers. We think they might have been New Balance. Half the class are wearing sneakers. The other half, they've got nothing on the feet. Right. And this was Arnold's light bulb moment. He thought, why don't we make a shoe specifically for this, for aerobics, and make it for women, on a woman's last, women's sizes, out of nice, soft glove leather. Fantastic idea. His idea was so good, he decided he'd go to see Paul Fireman. He's in Los Angeles, the other side of the country, Boston. He got the plane, got to Boston, went to see Paul Fireman, and explained everything. And Paul said, slow down. Slow down, Arno. We're a running company, and we're doing very nicely, thank you. Why do we want to make dancing shoes for girls? And he tries to, but Paul was saying no. Keep your eye on it, and if it starts to grow and do something, we'll think about it. Arnold wasn't happy with that. So Arnold went down to the back door. It was only small in those days. But back door, Steve Liggett. Steve Liggett's our production man, and he's in Korea more than he's in USA, but he's there. He did a better job with Steve. he convinced Steve, we really must look at this. Arnold got his 200 pairs, and he's given these to the instructors, some of the leading girls, and fabulous. They loved them. They're so comfortable. They were great. And the girls were not just wearing them for the aerobics, they were also wearing them in town, going to work, doing whatever. They were so comfortable. One problem, they're made out of glove leather. And glove leather, you can tear it like a piece of paper. It's 0.7 of a millimeter thick. And when you take the surface off, because you've got to stick a sole on it, you've got to put glue on, it's half a centimeter. So 0.5 of a centimeter, disaster. And yes, after 1 month, these shoes were just falling apart. Fortunately, we're in Los Angeles, and the girls didn't care. They thought the shoes were so comfortable, they went out and bought some more. Okay, we had to answer the problem. First thing we did was, well, first thing that they've manufactured, they actually laminated it with nylon. And when I learned about this, because I didn't learn about the fact that they were making them out of glove leather, if I'd have heard about that, I'd have probably said, whoa, what are you doing? However, marketing is something, shoemaking is something else. And so they started laminating it with nylon. And I said, look, you can't do that, because the natural thing of leather is that it breathes. You put nylon on it and you stop it breathing. So they're going to get all sweaty, they're not going to enjoy that. So what did they do? They punched a series of holes in the front to allow air to circulate. Fine, marketing again, not shoemaking. They did that, but we still had problems with the softness of the leather, the thinness of the leather, and we eventually cured that by making it with more like a garment leather, which was thicker, still soft and supple. Great. So we got that right, and the girls loved those shoes. And when Jane Fonda went out and bought a pair of Reeboks to use in her exercise videos, that was it. All of a sudden, boom, we just exploded. We were a $9 million company at that point. 12 months later, we were a $30 million company, then a $90 million company, $300 million, then $900 million in under 5 years. Surprisingly enough, whilst we were still doing some running, the aerobics just took it. That was, I mean, you can say that 95% of the growth was aerobics. It grew so rapidly, so fast. And when you think about it, that really was white space. There was nobody there. We had it. And this was something. Women had never owned an athletics category before. All of a sudden, they owned this. This was just women. And the men were saying, what's happening? We love the look of those soft shoes. We kept it away from, we couldn't give it to the men because keeping up with the demand for those aerobic shoes, that was our biggest problem. We almost forgot how to sell product because it was a matter of could we keep up with demand that was already there. And we were lucky. We were lucky when we're going from 300 to 5 to 900. It's how do you get the product? It wasn't the money anymore. It's how do you get the product? And Nike just hit a wall at that time. You know, they'd been going tremendously, but all of a sudden they found themselves with too much inventory, and it wasn't selling as fast. So they came out with about 3 major manufacturing units in South Korea, and we were just ready. We just went straight in, and that allowed Reebok to really sort of take advantage. Okay, we'd got to almost $1 billion, and the company then started to, we had to move into other categories. We had to go into baseball, into basketball and American football. I don't think we did too much in baseball. We grew in basketball. You know, Shaquille O'Neal, and that was great. And you mentioned pump. Pump was something that really belonged to basketball. And I don't know if you remember D. Brown. D. Brown, yeah, halfway, dunks the ball, bends down, and he pumps up his shoes. That everybody talks about that. Even now, when I meet them, oh, I remember, you know, and they were all kids like you know, when you're kids. I want a pair of pumps, and parents are saying, no, too expensive, too expensive. You know, you can get some Converse, you get whatever. Those pumps are too expensive. But no, they went out and got a job, anything to save up some money and get a pair of Reebok pumps. So we grew to about 3.8, almost just short of 4 billion. And at that time, I'm traveling the world. I'm putting on distribution. And I'd put on America, now I've put on another 30 countries. So I got 30 countries. I'm also hosting a pro celebrity tennis tournament in Monte Carlo. And the celebrities were all A-listers from Hollywood. We had Sinatra, we had Roger Moore, we had Sean Connery. You can name them all. There were so many of them that we had over there. And this was great. And I was doing the hosting and doing the traveling. And when I'm traveling, I'm picked up with a limousine, going to the best hotels, dining at the best restaurants, but the challenge had gone. You know, I'd had a challenge for so many years to really do whatever. Now we had so many accountants, so many lawyers, and all these people in between. And to me, it was just traveling, and the challenge had gone. Great, thrilled that the company is still there and the company is doing well, and I'm always thrilled about that, and we'll always support that. But for me, that personal challenge, yeah, so it was time to step back. So at the end of 1989, early 1990, I stepped back and enjoyed life. But eventually, I got to write a book.
There's that quote, like every success story, there's been a sacrifice, a mighty payoff for the glitter and the gold that comes with industrial celebrity. There's only room for one love when your heart is fully invested in your passion, and it seems like that's where you probably decided to.
Well, I decided to write the book because during my working life with Reebok, we didn't have social media, we didn't have the web, we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones, but now I'm relaxing and I've got a computer now. And I'm reading Wikipedia and I'm reading Google, and they're telling me this is how Reebok started. And a photograph of Joe Foster. Well, I don't know if he was called Joe Foster or not, but that photograph was certainly not of me. So I guess that sparked a little bit of challenge again. And so I thought, I've got to put this right. So start writing your book, Joe. So eventually I got the book written. I had some help because it's difficult to put the emotion into something when you're writing it. So come on, you know, you've got to make this. So we got it right. We got the timings right and everything, and eventually we got the book. Just to put the story straight, we launched it right at the beginning of the pandemic. So of course we couldn't do any signings or anything like that. But since then, people have started reading it, particularly entrepreneurs and people who do these. You can learn from people, you can online, or you can go to universities for an MBA or an executive MBA course, and now they're all asking the question, how did you do it? You know, and reading the book, they're sort of thinking, well, there's a lot of stuff in this book which shows what you do if you're an entrepreneur and what you've got to do. So since then we've been invited, Julie and I, we travel the world now and go over and we talk about the book. But in the book, there's a lot more than I can ever say today, and a lot of things that happened and how it happened, like how we got the name Reebok. That's another one we haven't even touched. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, that's the actual name.
Yeah. Okay, then we'll touch on that. Well, Jeff and I, we started off as Mercury Sports Footwear in 1958. Great, we're doing well, and our accountant said, Joe, you better register your name because you're doing well. And if somebody else starts making Reebok shoes, making Mercury shoes, not Reebok, making Mercury shoes, you're going to have trouble. So register your name. We were a bit naive. We didn't even know that there was a register. So I was given the name of, there were agents in Manchester, there were patent agents in Manchester, go see them. So I went to see them and they searched out the Mercury name for me, and they came back and said, can't use it, it's already registered. Oh, however, they will sell it to you. It's British Shoe Corporation have it registered for footwear. They'll sell it to you, but they want £1,000. I said, I've not got £1,000. Oh, he said, well, you can take them to court and claim it because they're not using it. I said, how much is that going to cost me? I said, about £1,000. So, same story. So he pointed through the window. It was a nice day in May, and he pointed to a sign called Kodak. It was Kodak. And I said, well, what's with Kodak? He said, well, they made it. They made that name up. They invented it. A name like that is perfect. He said, but don't bring me one name, bring me 10. And I said, 10? 10? Why? And he said, well, it takes about a month to put a name through the register for everybody to check out and whatever. And if we go one at a time and you don't get one for 10, you're going to be 10 months without a name. We're really going to be in trouble. Bring me 10. Okay. So I go back and we're sitting around the table, as you do, trying to think of a new name, right? So we come up with Cougar. How about Cougar? Yeah, Cougar's a good name. Cougar Sports. Falcon Sports. Where are we going? We're going down animals or birds, or we're going down that route. Yeah, okay. Let me take you back to 1943. I'm 8 years old, and like COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. Nobody could move about because the war was on, but we had local events. And I was entered into an 80-yard race, and I won it. I won the race. I'm wearing Foster spikes, so that probably gave me an advantage. Thank you, grandfather. Maybe that was a good thing for me. So I'm wearing spikes, and I go up and collect my prize. And what do I get? I get a dictionary. And I'm saying, where's the football? You know, I'm a kid, 8 years old. What do I want with the dictionary? And we don't even have school. And what's more, it was a Webster's dictionary, and a Webster's dictionary is an American dictionary. So an American dictionary in 1943, and I'm somewhat destroyed by the fact that that was my prize. I suppose I could have kicked the dictionary around, but it wasn't a football. However, let's fast forward to 1960, and my dictionary sat next to me, and I like the letter R. So I open it, R. And it's not long before, when you're thumbing through, you come across E. R-E-E-B-O-K. What's that? Reebok. What's that? It's a small South African gazelle. We're a running company. Gazelle. Fabulous. That's it. That's our name. Fantastic. I put it at the top of the list, go back to the agent, and say, look, here's your list. Here's your 10 names, but we want that one. We want that one. We could fall in love with this. We really need that. He's a lawyer. He said, okay, Joe, we'll see what we can do. Took him about 2 weeks. He came back and said, Joe, you've got your wish. You can have Reebok. Great. The registrar has one caveat. If anybody wants to make shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Well, Jeff and I sort of looked at each other and said, that'll never happen. No, that'll never happen. That's impossible. So we got Reebok. However, the registrar in his wisdom said that we can only put you in the B section of the register because of the fact that if anybody uses Reebok skin to make shoes, that's it. 10 years later, the registrar came back and said, we've moved you into the A section. And we said, really? Why? Well, he said, everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports shoe and the animal has to become second. So that's how we got Reebok.
I actually, I don't feel I'm alone. I actually had no idea that it was an animal because I just associate it to the brand. Right. It's incredible. I think, and I guess within the book there's going to be a lot of principles because I think, you can go more in depth in that. But what to me was interesting to actually know is how did you deal with work-life balance, and then how do you deal with making executive decisions? Because the scaling is going amazingly well, but most people have issues with hiring the right people, like conflict resolution, even family members thinking that maybe you've got unlimited resources. So as things are growing, how did you handle those new spaces that you were entering in terms of like now the wealth? Well, fortunately, we're in a very visible business. Sport, we never went into recession. Recessions happened in the UK. We never went into recession. The demand for our product was always there. And it's because sport has continued, even from my grandfather's day, has continued to expand and expand. People in the north of England, this is how football started. In the north of England, they worked in these big mills with all this noise. And the guys, when time to go out, somebody get a ball and they start kicking it around. And
This is how that started. It's the same with any sport. Sport now is so big and it's growing. And in fact, sport now influences street so much. Everybody's out there with casual clothes on, sports. In fact, it's probably performance clothing. You see a lot of girls now just walking around in gym gear because it's comfortable, and it's now the fashion. So we're all fashion companies now. And once Reebok started to use influencers, not just for performance, they used influencers like singers and music. They used that influence, and so it's elevated the sports product. It's elevated it to now something that is fashion and everybody wants to take a piece of. And when it comes to employing people, we were a winning company. We had a culture, and it was always that people wanted to be part of that culture. And that was the great thing about it. You know, we were not just making widgets or whatever that we needed. We needed more people to use a lathe or whatever. No, when it came to Reebok, they wanted to be there. They wanted to be part of it. And we made it, certainly I made it my policy not to sell Joe Foster, but to sell Reebok. It was always Reebok. People really don't know Joe Foster. I'm only just coming out from the shadows now. I need to sell Joe Foster because I'm selling the book. Now we've got the book. No good writing the book unless you can sell it, unless people go out and buy it. So we're having a bit of fun with that, and it's taken us all over the place. So that's why we're selling Joe Foster right now. But before then it was Reebok, and everybody believed in it. They felt they were part of it, which we wanted. We wanted people to, we listened to people, and if you get the right people, you will grow. Yeah, it can't all come from out here. One or two ideas come out. The sole that I designed, which is this sole, this sole that I designed in 1978 for our 5-star shoe is still used today. The Roadstar sole is still from 1978. Here we are in 2022, and it's still one of the best. The star crest, which is on the tongue, is something which I designed way back in about 1975, and that's still used. So what amazes me is that we still have, but I think that's good. I think people like that consistency of a brand. When they see that, okay, we move on, we inch things on a bit, we use different things, but when they feel that consistency, and I think people fell in love with Reebok. A lot of people fell in love with Reebok, and a lot of people who are now in the late 40s, early 50s were kids at Reebok's height, and they wanted those pumps. They really wanted pump, and that's what they remember. People started to wear Reeboks traveling, and they became the shoe of choice. You know, even in many articles, go get your Reeboks if you're traveling. It almost became a generic term for sneakers. Fortunately, sneakers is now the generic term, but Reebok almost became that. So yeah, it's great. And now, with Adidas for 15 years, which didn't do Reebok any good, you can't blame Adidas. You've got to blame the people who sold it to Adidas, because Adidas paid a lot of money, but they took a lot of the things out of Reebok. They took some of the assets.
Could I just, and when you get to the point of actually, because I'm a Man United fan, and I'm hearing about how the Glazers are about to sell, and I kept thinking, like, there's valuation and there's actually, you know, what a company's making. But when it gets to a point where a sale of that magnitude is proposed, like, what role do you leave it to your lawyers? Like, how do you even go about selling a brand that big? Because it must be so complex.
Well, by the time Adidas came along in 2005, I had retired or stepped back in 1990. I've been connected with the company forever, but 1990 I stepped back, and the brand plateaued. Instead of growing, you know, with a company you can continue to grow. If you plateau, the danger is you're going to go down. So the Reebok brand plateaued and couldn't seem to get itself going again.
Was that painful for you? Was it painful for you to see that when you'd invested, like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we'd got a brand which was going to last for a long time and would not really die because it had so much credibility in it. It's just that it needed the right people to keep it growing, to keep it moving forward. And the somewhere at that point where we didn't get the right people. If we'd had the right people at the top, I think that would have continued a nice growth to be where, say, Nike is today at over 20 billion, and Adidas are now in the high teens of billions. Unfortunately for Adi, they've just got a few little rocky moments right now. They'll come back, but you know, it's they've got to get over the rocky moments. And I don't know. Nike is sort of making some decisions. They were deciding to come out of retail, and now I think they're going back into retail. So I think when you get to the top of the hill, it's where do you go next? And I think Reebok lost that. They were at the top. We were at the top. When I left, we were number one. We'd overtaken Adidas. We'd overtaken Nike. We were number one.
Well, what year was that then?
That's the end of the 80s. Well, 89, 90, up to 91, 92, we were still number one.
Is it? And I wonder, because what's the competition element like? Is it, you know, do Nike try and poach some of your staff? Do you try and take some of theirs? Like, how does it work on that end? Because it must be, it's a lot of...
Yeah, well, there were a couple of lawsuits on those things going on, and a lot of bit of infighting. And I mean, when I was there, a lot of the people had worked with Nike, had worked with New Balance, and they'd come to work with Reebok. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization of people coming in and out. You know, the trade was a trade, and I always enjoyed it. I know some of the people sort of got a bit annoyed at whatever was going on, but I think if you concentrate on the opposition or the competition. If you concentrate on the competition, you're not doing what you should be doing. And that's concentrating on where these spaces are, where you can take the brand. And Reebok had a lot of white spaces. They did a lot of things. They went into, say, music before anybody else did, and so it goes on. So it's going into these spaces. It's making, your marketing has to be looking for something new, something a little bit different. And I think Reebok lost that vision. They lost something in the late 90s and the early noughties, and so eventually we're not going anywhere. The investors think it's time to get out, find a buyer, and unfortunately they found Adidas. All right, for Adidas took a few of the assets and grew the brand in America, which is what they wanted to do, and Reebok drifted down a bit, became in the shadows. Now we were in Panama, and they're going on. Reebok is unleashed. So Reebok is going to by the end of next year, they expect the brand to be near enough $5 billion again, purely and simply on the fact that we will be available globally through maybe 20,000 outlets. There are that many outlets now that will have the brand. So it's going to grow. Then where next? 2030 they expect 10 billion, but yeah, I'm expecting them to start looking bigger.
What was the value of it? And then also globally, how many staff did you have working for Reebok at that time?
Well, we didn't have it valued. You know, as far as I was concerned, I let people in because we needed money. We needed money. So we didn't sell it, just letting people in, and I slowly backed out. So it wasn't a valuation, it was like, you know, when you need things, you've got to make decisions. We needed the money. We would never have been able to take advantage of the aerobics growth if we hadn't have accepted that we needed the money to start it. In the end, it didn't need the money, but it needed millions to begin with, and millions and millions. Now you need billions, but it needed millions. And I didn't have that. And if I'd have sat there and said, no, I want to remain in control. No. For me, it was, where can we actually take the brand? And when we became number one, you've got to say, yeah, the decisions were right. You made it. And so making the decisions to allow people in or sell your share, you know, I'm founder. And lots of CEOs have come and gone, but they can't change the founder.
Just on investment, briefly, it's quite clear, not agenda is the wrong word, but an investment is always transactional, however it's dressed up. Did you feel that became more and more evident as soon as investors are coming that it just seemed more transactional, and I won't say less creative, but it just seemed about, you know, what's the P&L, how are we doing, as opposed to, this actually is a good product. How can we make this product as successful as the last one, but it just seemed more financially driven.
I think when money and finance become the driving force of the company, you're losing the real sort of focus. The focus has got to be developing the brand, and you know, financial people should come in and get out as they wish, but you know, that focus for the brand should be on creativity, not on the money, and I think there will be more focus now on creativity again. And you know, there was a time, and I suppose during those sort of early years of the 21st century, when if a company is not continuing to grow, investors would prefer to get out. And so that's when valuations come in and whatever. And it got to that size where Adidas did buy the company, and they paid $3.6 billion for it. And since then, ABG bought the company, which was valued, then it got valued at $1 billion. It was doing about $1.5 billion in revenues, but ABG paid $2.5 billion. So it's who thinks they can, what they can do with it. And whilst everybody thought they'd overpaid by a lot of money, I think that people will look back, and if in 12 months or 18 months they've got to $5 billion, they could actually float the company, IPO, and they could get the money that they invested back and still remain the major shareholder. So who knows which way it will go. So I think money is a diversion away from a brand. A brand needs to keep its mind on what it's doing, where it's going, and let the people with the money make their minds up. But really, you've got to put the energy into the brand itself.
And in terms of the book, what takeaways, and I know it's quite extensive in terms of the things it covers, what takeaways do you feel people should or could take away from the book?
From the book? I think what the takeaway is the fact that I had a lot of fun, we had a lot of problems, we turned those problems into advantages. And I think, and it's what people say, you know, so you get faced with, you've got to change your name. For whatever period of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 10 weeks, or whatever it takes, so you'd be disappointed. The thing is, you've soon got to change that around to saying, this is an opportunity. Yeah, something's coming along to say now there's an opportunity to do something better. And you turn yourself, and that's what the optimist is. The optimist is one that turns himself into something better. And then you get a fancy name for that, like you're an entrepreneur.
Does it, and I think mindset seems to be a big thing, you know, and I see you as a visionary, because I'm just looking at the walls that we see today. We look at things and everything's on Instagram and we think, I need to have a blue tick, I need to have these followers. We see limitations as opposed to scope, to scale. And I'm looking at the times that when you were growing, some things hadn't even existed, you know, and I think mindset and being able to pivot seems to be a key thing. Like, it was football, you know, from your grandfather, then they went to like women's apparel, like, and these were things where, like you said, wide spaces. And do you take that as part of your own innate character, or is it, you know, the people around you? Because it wasn't the obvious moves at the time that you were making them.
I think if you get people who want to be part of the thinking process, you can't do it on your own. No matter how brilliant you are, you'll run out of ideas. You need people, and you need them to be likewise thinkers. You don't want egos. Yeah. Keep away from egos. But you want people who want to be part of Reebok. And if they want to be part of Reebok or not part of their name, then somebody will come up. Now, the idea, Arnold is down there in Los Angeles, the opportunity comes in front of him. It would have never come in front of me in Manchester, but it did in Los Angeles. So we have the right people, and if they have the vision, Arnold could have said, oh, that's okay, to his wife, yeah, that sounds good. But no, he had that eagerness to say, wow, I must look at that. So you get, you attract those sort of people. Yeah. And that's brilliant. You buy accountants you pay for accountants and you pay for lawyers. You don't expect them to think about creativity because they have a job. They know what their job is. Okay, if they've got a bit of creativity in them, that helps. But basically, they keep you straight with the finances, straight with the legal side of it. But you need a lot of creative people. And I mean, that's really what a brand needs. It needs creative people, people who will think a little bit differently and be ready when somebody comes up with something to, as we now say, pivot. For me, it was change direction. Like, we used to grow the business, now it's scaling the business. But, you know, these are just modern words for the same old thing.
And then with the book, then, what's the actual time it took for you to do? I'm sure there must have been quite a few revisions, but how long does it actually take for you from inception to actually publishing the book?
About 5 years. It took a long time. It's surprising enough when you start writing, you don't spend all 5 years on it, you just put it to one side from there. But the thing is that you want to get the chronology in order. And okay, certain things are very obvious, but others are not so obvious. Think, how did I do this? How did I do whatever it is? And you need a bit of help. You need to ask people who you were with, you need to ask people who write books, how do they make it go in a nice line so that, you know, you're not going over here and you lose people's attention. So you need help. It's the same with the brand. I needed help. I couldn't have done all that happened, but if you allow it to happen, if you accept other people to come and help, then it happens. And yes, you need a bit of luck. We needed to be in the right place at the right time. Running came around at the right time. Those were the sort of things. Aerobics came around at the right time. So you need that bit of luck. But people say to me, there's no such thing as luck. It's being prepared for when the opportunity arises. But, you know, opportunities are everywhere. And can you be prepared for everything? Timing. You know, if you're not there at the right time, people who were really working with computers, now computers, that's controlling everything now. That's taking everything anywhere now. And even when we go to do these, to the universities to talk to the MBA people, and the professors there, they start off with, okay, John, what was your exit plan? We didn't have an exit plan. Now you have to have an exit plan because investors, well, let's put it this way, we were a product, and in those early days we were looking for money. The only place we could go was bank, and unless you had collateral, you couldn't get money from a bank. So it was hard work in those early days. But today, there's so much money, so many financial institutions that they are now looking for products. But when they look for a product, you come up with a product, they want to know the exit plan, because if they're going to invest $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, they want to know how long it's going to be before they can take that and a profit from the business. So everything's turned differently. You know, it's such a different world these days from when we did the start. Regrets? My brother died just as we got the 5 stars. He didn't see that growth. He didn't see that wonderful thing that came along, and that was so sad. And I talked about Barter, and Barter did get it wrong. If Jeff had been around, he would have been down with the Barter factory, showing them what to do. As it happened, we didn't have anybody down there, and they changed things, and we got a lot of problems with that. But it's in the book.
Some of the lessons that you've learned along your journey?
Well, the lessons will always be different for different people. And I think the one thing that I say to anybody who asks the question, the 3 most important things. Number 1 is have fun. Number 2, have much more fun. And number 3, it's got to be really fun. Because if you don't have fun, you've got to pivot. Get out of it. Move. Don't try and make something work that isn't working. Give it your best shot, but don't try to make it work. Pivot. Do something else. Don't worry if you've got an idea and it fails. That's a lesson. It's a lesson, but you get up and you go somewhere else. To do that, you need to be an optimist. And this is where it comes to the genes. Are the genes there to be an optimist? Are you an optimist? Is there, you know, even when things are really bad, well, we could do something about that. We could change. That's an opportunity. It's the way you look at it, instead of, oh my God, why this again? Oh, I don't know, I'm sick of this. You know, if you get to that, then you're losing it. You know, you've got to be ready for the fact that life is not a smooth, nice, straightforward path. There's always something in the way. There's always somebody to give you a kick. Okay, you know, dodge it, do whatever, but don't expect life to be just simple and straightforward. It isn't. And the more you can accept that, the more successful you will be. So it's, and I know that, and I know a lot of people who are not optimistic, brilliant people, but without the optimism, they tend to fail more than succeed. And so maybe optimism is being stupid. Maybe optimism is just saying, and it's taking a gamble. Not a gamble, a risk. Now, optimists take a risk, you know. Well, is it going to be safe to do that? Well, okay, I'll do it. And you take that. If somebody is forever saying, no, you don't do that. And when I say take a risk, these are calculated risks. They're not stupid risks. They're not something where, they're not a gamble. It's wrong to say you gamble. You don't gamble. You just take that risk because you think, oh, I can always come back. I can always start again. I can always do it.
That it's a possibility, you know, that it can happen, and not thinking that instinctively it's impossible to happen. Because we need, I think, as you're saying, we need the world driven on people who are visionaries and actually can make things manifest from their mind and actually bring it to the world. Without that, the world would be how it's like 3,000 years ago. It's always moving, so yeah, there's a key.
Yeah, I mean, there is, you know, COVID was exceedingly bad and terrible, caused deaths and whatever. But would we be doing this now, but for COVID? Would you be doing Zoom, but for COVID? You know, it's...
I've been working as well, just things.
Yeah, you know, these are the things that we've advanced so much in so many different ways, and now the world is different. And okay, a lot of people work from home, a lot of people don't want to work again. But those are the pessimists, you know. The optimists are saying, wow, I can work from home, I can do this. They take advantage of the opportunity and make it work, not take advantage for themselves. And sort of, you know, don't want to commit again. You have to commit. You know, if you're going to be successful, commit. And smile, even when there's some bad things. And, you know, not every day is good. There's a lot of days that are not so good. But, you know, you got to know that you're going to come up again, and that you should smile at it. Fortunately, I'm at that right side now, and I can look at all those bad days and just say, they were nothing.